You're missing blue sheets. So I'm messaging Indigo because I can't remember the
MTD at IETF105. Meeting trouble desk.
Thank you. They notified the secretary. I prepared have the slide.
Thank you very much.
Should I?
So does the clicker work? So you have to go full screen?
Yes.
No, you're not full screen.
No, I'm not. But is this have you updated since the version 0?
No.
Okay.
Scribes and blue sheets and everything.
Blue sheets are missing. Just notify the secretariat.
Fine. Should have scribes.
And probably.
Anybody would like to scribe for core?
It's only a 1 hour meeting today, so it's a bargain.
I mean, well. So anybody wants to take minutes?
I can assist taking minutes, but I've already done 2 today, so I'm getting it so. But happy to help out.
You want a jabber scribe or a scribe scribe?
No taker.
If you take notes and jump on this, great. If you want to take them privately, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, everything.
It will be in the etherpad wherever the hell.
Yes.
Okay, so good evening. Welcome to the core meeting. So I'm Carsten Bormann, and this is not Jaime Jimenez, because we have a stand-in chair this time. Francesca Palambini, and the name isn't defined yet, but might be Julia. So we. Okay, so this is an IETF meeting. Note well and all. Agenda bashing. We have only 1 hour today, so we took essentially 4 short items. And we have 2 hours on Thursday, and this is where we will do the complicated stuff. So today, this is the core applications, resource directory, PubSub, DynLink, and the CoreConf cluster, the Yang cluster. And Thursday is OSCORE related work and multicast related work, and maybe an update of the GroupCom document, a bit of CNML, revisit of the FACER congestion control proposal, and then we even might have some time if we don't spend it early. Any comments on the agenda? Oh, sorry, this is not the final agenda here. I wasn't able to upload slides, so FACER is moving a little bit to the beginning because there is something happening in TSV WG that Ilpo has to go to. Good. Anything else we need to change in the agenda? Okay. This slide is not complete. We had 2 hours, nearly 2 hours of side meeting already in the slot preceding this slot. So we discussed mostly core applications and a little bit of hypermedia. So some of the changes are in the slides already. And tomorrow morning, there will be a side meeting of the Think to Thing research group. And I'm sure we can find out when that starts, I think 8:30. And yeah, what else should I be pointing to? Anything else that's interesting for this group? That's this one. Okay. So, working group document status. We actually published RFC 8613 a couple of weeks ago. So you can all congratulate Francesca. This may have been the hardest document to finish in this group. We have other documents in ISG processing right now. There is one with a discuss that we hope to clear this week, and two we just submitted to the ISG. So these are going through AD review, and we might either get them back or get them forwarded next week or so. And we have 3 documents that are in last call processing. Stateless, I think we still need a revised ID. Am I correct in that? Echo request tag, we need a revised ID after the working group last call. And hop limit, we have a revised ID, but I haven't heard anything from the people who had comments. So I think before we push the button on that, it would be good to have some feedback from the people who had comments. And Alexei?
Do you want me to say anything about the documents in PubRec state? Or?
This one? Which one?
Well, the one below, it's easier probably.
I can't really hear you. The speakers here in this room are put in a way that they're anti-phase.
Would you like me to speak about any of these documents?
Yes, please.
Okay, fine. So I started my review. I finished the edge. I just need to write it down. Basically, 2 comments on it is there are 2 minor problems in the media type registration template. One is the encoding field actually is supposed to be a selection of 4 choices in my spec. So it's talk about other encodings, but it doesn't have to talk about in the same level of details. The other thing missing is the handling of fragment identifiers as per plus JSON or plus CBOR suffixes. I think other than that, they're fairly simple. So yeah, I'll send an email on this. But
what we learn from this is that those documents that do media type registrations probably need a special review within the working group to make sure they are already good when they leave the working group. I think we know how to do that, but apparently didn't do this right.
Submitted to the media type request, and I saved the message to reply to them anyway. So, but yeah, anyway, the directory, it's slightly longer document, takes a bit more effort. I'll write down my comments. I think it's mostly fine. My general comments is that some bits are slightly underspecified, like secure discovery things. It's not always clear whether references are truly informative, whether, maybe you can argue that all the informative reference should stay as informative, but there might be a couple of cases where I will question that. think that's probably it at this point.
Yeah, in any case, this slide is kind of, we finally are moving documents through this working group. It seems to work. So given that we are shipping documents, we actually now are making adoption calls. Well, this one here had a little accident where it expired just when I was going to do a working group last call. And so it will be resubmitted, and then we will do the working group last call. And these are adoption calls. So we had an adoption call on the two main CORAL documents. We had pretty good response on that, all positive. It ends today, so you can still throw in your opinion. We had a call on the Yang library, and actually nobody responded to that except for Andy Bierman, who said this is the wrong approach. So later in the CoreConf segment, we will have to discuss that. And we made an adoption call of corrections and clarifications about 37 years ago, and for some reason haven't closed that yet. So I have to talk to my co-chair when he's back to find out where we are with that. But if you still have an opinion on this, since it's still in limbo, you can still answer the working group adoption call if you still find it on the mailing list. Okay, that's about document status. Any other questions about document status? Because there are a number of documents we are working on. I'm not listing them here. Good. So let's talk about DNSSD. Forward, backward.
Okay, I'm Peter van der Stok. I'm going to tell you about RDDNSSD. The importance of the document has recently been increased a little bit because within the resource directory document there was a reference how you could discover the resource directory. You've had discussions about it. Proves that we have to have more experience with the resource directory to see how it can be discovered. But one of the subjects there was how to discover it with DNS, and the promise was to put that in the RDDNSSD draft. The RDDNSSD draft has some additions. First of all, where the RD service is exported to DNS, so that you can find it from the DNS. And certainly we have some examples where especially we put the ST, how's it called? Attribute, yeah. ST attribute owner parameter in to see how it is used, which defines the service of the resource within the DNS. So the new parameter is ST. It maps directly to the service part in the DNSSD service instance. And it is pre-specified. So before in the draft, the RDDNSSD, there was no automatic transformation from the resource type, which is defined within the core, to the service type, which was to DNS. This has proved to be very unhappy and unlucky because of use of character sets, which were not completely equivalent. So we now said you have to define the ST attribute and register it in the appropriate transport protocol port number registry. So that makes clarifies things a lot, I must say, and then so it conforms to the syntax which is defined. So I will try to get with the example. If you can't actually define anything, just go through the examples. So what we have is we have the RD lookup res. You can ask for all the resources which actually should be exported, which is mentioned because the EXP attribute is set in the link. So the request is here. There's fortunately only one return which says that XP, which is there. So it means it is one of the resources which has what needs to be exported to DNS, and it tells you the ST, which in this case is ORC Lite, and which should have been actually specified before. And we have then the RT, the resource type, which is actually used by the resource directory for filtering, if you like, which there is also specified in the link. And it tells you what is the instance name, because within DNS you have the service and you have the instance and the domain. So instance, service, domain specifies actually what you want to find out in the DNS. And there are some other attributes which are resource directory specific, which is the sector and the endpoint. So what the idea is that once it is defined in the resource directory like it is here, that you have an agent which goes through this data and then following the creates the DNS, the resource records. And one of the points which still have to be clarified more in the draft is how you find the DNS zone name, which actually corresponds with all the devices which you find which are registered in the resource directory. So in this case, what you see, there is a service defined and there's a pointer record which points to all the possible instances which you find for this possible service. So here there's only one instance, but you can easily imagine that you can have hundreds of instances, which will make the search a bit difficult. So one has to be very careful about actually specifying what kind of service you want and what are the different instances so that the whole thing remains manageable. Then what it says that the spot OEC ID Lite, which is this instance of this service, has a text record, and in that you can put the different attributes which are not really known to DNS, but you want to actually inform to the people using the devices using the resource, which are then put in the text records. So in this case, you will see that there is this sector is defined here and the resource type has been defined, which are not known to DNS, but you can put in a TXT record. And then finally, then we come to the part which is important. We see that this instance with the service, which is on the service name, which is found here in the device office example.com, which can then be found with the host name and the host name where you will find it, that it has the IP address where it then finally can be found. Any comments on that? No?
I have a question, just now looking at it. Does it make sense to set ST without setting EXP?
Does it make sense to set? You can do it, but there is no meaning to that.
Yeah. And if I set exp and do not set ST?
Then you have a problem because the server will not be able to actually determine what the service type is.
So it seems they are kind of...
You think it's double, yeah.
So that may be worth thinking about somehow.
Yeah, okay, good. Fine remark. Yes.
What are the privacy implications of this? So who has authorization to scan this information?
Can you say your name?
Sorry, I can't.
What are the privacy implications? How is authorization to this information controlled?
Can you also state your name, please?
Michael McCool.
Very good remark. Actually, that is also true for the resource directory. You want to know if you put things in the resource directory, how can this be authorized? I want to point here to the authorization server, which has been developed under ACE, and there are some hints both in the resource directory and also in the RD draft how this should be done. But how you want to actually do and specify it, I think is the subject of another draft. Yeah. Other remarks? Yeah, okay. If you think this is interesting, I all recommend that you read the DNSSD drafts. Yeah, before. So then one of the things is that actually you want to export the resource directory also to the DNS, which makes it possible that from DNS you can find the resource directories in the domain that interests you. And that is slightly different, because in this case you have to do when you know the resource directory address, you can get a get and ask well-known core, what is the exp which is there which is there present. And in this case, we have two types of resources, which is the RD lookup res and the RD lookup EP, which both serve to do the resource lookup and the endpoint lookup. And it tells you also which, with the standard vector, what the service type is, etc. One of the things, it's different because where the resource record gives you the complete URI that you want to look, here you only got the resource mentioned. So the agent has to be slightly different. It has to get the domain, the name, and the scheme from this, from actually already well known from the resource directory itself, and not from the contents of the resource directory. Yeah. So I think that is about, oh yeah, and here to answer your question, the instance here has been determined by the authorization server. So when they ask, may I actually, can I be output to DNS, then what the authorization server gives you an identifier, and that has been put there. I think that's it. Oh yeah, one of the things which are not clear yet, or we still need some discussion, is how you actually specify the co-op, which is the transport that we use, or co-op S, which may be different. And as you have seen in the other example, we have put it in the service type, such that you can use it there. We use the .sub there to distinguish. We have to see how things will be used, if this .sub can be removed later on. Yeah. You want to react to that, Stuart? No? Okay. So here's the same thing, but then for the two ones worked out also for the resource directory. I think I'm done here.
We have one more slide.
Yes, this is why I'm not done. So we still have to do how to derive the domain part from the DNS servers within the one. There are some drafts which already gives hints and how you could do it, but we think it may be good to spell it completely out here. And so how to handle the transport co-op S, that needs to be added to the servers in the DNS. So for the moment we have a solution, but I can understand that there's some discussion. Yep. You want to say something? Okay.
I'm Stuart Treasure from Apple. I can give you my advice on these two questions. What we did in the discovery proxy code we've been working on, which is on the IETF Hackathon GitHub page,
I know.
is the default configuration, if you just install the OpenWRT package, is home.arbor.
Okay.
Which is something you can use within your home. It's not globally unique. You don't expect it to work between networks, but it gives you an out-of-the-box default that does something reasonable. You can then override that manually if you want a domain with global significance. And I think the same thing would work here. On the second point, if I'm understanding what you wrote there correctly, you're talking about in the SRB record, the transport protocol label, which is typically either TCP or UDP.
Yeah, in this case it's UDP, yeah.
So my advice there is, I think if we could go back and do it again, we wouldn't do it that way. I think that was a mistake in the definition of SRB. The service name doesn't have to encode the implementation details. It doesn't have to say .tls if it uses TLS. It doesn't have to say .utf8 if it uses UTF-8 text. It doesn't have to say .IEEE if it uses floating point numbers. The service name is not a description of the protocol. It is just a unique ID that you look up in the table. If I could go back and do it again, I would get rid of the TCP and UDP and I would just call it _SRB. And then you read the RFC to find out what the detail is.
No, I understand that,
Given where we are, the established convention is that anything that runs over TCP uses _TCP, and anything else says _UDP.
Yes.
Even if it's actually not using UDP, it doesn't matter. That just means other, and it's just boilerplate text, and don't think it has any particular meaning.
Okay, fine. Okay, thank you very much.
So what's your timeline on this?
End of this year is a reasonable timeline, I think. Maybe earlier. Depends on the discussions we have ongoing, etc.
Singapore would be a pretty good time.
Yes, Singapore seems to be a lovely time for lots of things. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Michael?
Okay.
Christian, can you tap Michael?
Thank you.
Right, so what do I do? Click here? Yeah, okay. So PubSub, we recently, really recently, on a pre-meeting around the deadline time, and then over the last few days, done a lot of work on PubSub. I have a lot of slides. I'm going to try to get through them in 15 minutes. So if you, unless it's super burning, kind of hold off till the end. So what we're doing is addressing the remaining issues around topic handling. We tried to define, new response codes and a bunch of different things, and we kind of have a new design around topic handling that avoids a lot of those issues. Specifically, how to handle empty topics, how to publish link format documents that had name conflict, how to simplify and clarify lifetime, and while doing that, keeping it compatible with REST APIs. So what we're proposing is to create a topic configuration resource that's separate from the topic data. So we'll use create and delete on the configuration resource and publish and subscribe on the data resource. This gives us a clear separation of the management of the topic from the transfer of data through the topic, and it gives us a more RESTful interaction model around topic control than we had before with just links. Also, there's an opportunity to improve the security because you may not have really the same access control for managing topics that you do for publishing and subscribing through them. And there's a proposal in the GitHub repo that describes it. So the topic configuration is a Coral document. So we're beginning to include Coral as we had to pick a format. So Coral is the best one coming up that's supported by IETF and in core apps. So that's what we decided to use. But also you can still use link format. And the fact that we have an underlying Coral document makes it easier to have some sensible defaults for just using link format to create topics. So a topic creator, someone using PubSub does not need to know Coral to use it in a simple fashion, but should use Coral documents if they want to do more sophisticated control. So basically, when you create a topic, you get a configuration resource. And when you publish to a topic, that creates a data resource. The topic is not discoverable, it's not subscribable until it's been created. So we're probably looking at actually returning 405, method not allowed, which is I can't get. I could put to it, I can publish, but I can't do a get. I can't do a get or observe, and I can't subscribe yet, right? And also then when you create a topic, you have a way now with Coral document to include content. So you can actually do your first publish in the same operation as the creation. The topic configuration resource contains topic metadata such as the location, creation time, publish time, lifetimes, descriptions, content formats, and the current topic state. The client can supply a hint for what it wants the path to look like, and the server could do that if it can. And also representations for first publish and representations for tombstone, which is sort of a way of sending a special representation that says that the data are no longer valid. Of course, that's content format specific, so there's a limited amount that we can normatively specify in our document about that. More about that later, though. Creating a topic involves submitting a Coral document to an entry point in a REST API. And you can accept a Coral document back that returns this stuff that was on the previous slide, along with the location in the header. So it's typical REST pattern. You do create, you get a location back. Here's where you can find the thing that was created. We're going to return a document in the payload also on creation that contains some of that metadata as well. And the submitted document may, as I mentioned earlier, may contain a link or embedded content for the first publish. Optionally, you can just submit a link format document to create a path, and there will be, to create a topic, and there will be some sensible defaults. And then you get a link format document back that contains a link to the data resource that then you can publish to. Discovering topics, you can ask for CORAL or link format. If you ask for CORAL, you're going to get the metadata. If you ask for link format, you're just going to get pointers. Yeah, topics are only discoverable after they've been published, but they're really only subscribable. There's going to be a way for a publisher to publish. We need to provide that. So topic discovery has some built-in filters, like the stuff we define in RFC 6690, RT, IF, things like that. If you want to do more, you can use fetch and CORAL, and so you can provide the fields that you want to filter on in a CORAL document and use fetch, and then filter that way. So discovery, you can use both CORAL or link format documents thereby. And the result of discovery contains a list of links or configuration representations, configuration resource representations if you want CORAL. We've simplified the lifetime handling because we don't have to try to fit it into query parameters or anything like that. Now we can just have them to be fields in the CORAL document. And of course, there'll be reasonable defaults for those if you don't use CORAL. Also, if you're going to use data lifetime, so basically, data lifetime probably will require a tombstone document or some kind of representation to send out. Otherwise, there isn't really a good way. But then we thought maybe 405 might be a way to indicate the data lifetime is expired to clients as well, saying, you know, method not allowed. So you're observing and you're getting responses back, and then the data times out, you might get a 405 saying you can't really observe anymore because the data are stale. Same thing with the get, it might end up being 405. The topic timeout, if the topic times out and you haven't published it or refreshed it in a certain amount of time, then that would result in the 404. Configuration management of topics, I think we covered most of this already, but basically that the CORAL document is how you manage topics. You can get to look at the current state, you can patch to update individual fields, and you can observe if you want to see when the topic state or configuration state changes. Publish and subscribe work this pretty much the same way they do in the current draft. That is standard CRUD semantics with get and put. You publish or write using put, you read using get, and subscribe using observe. So a publisher subscriber doesn't need to have anything more than the basic COAP library to work with PubSub. So a couple of additional features we're still sort of in design on, and that is a topic hierarchy. We've been asked about can topics still be a hierarchy? Can you have parent topics and child topics? And yeah, probably yes. That what we would need to do would be to allow the topic to be an entry point for creating. And then that has some advantages in that if you've already set the configuration resource for the parent topic, the child topics could inherit that data, and you could then sort of set up your broker using CORAL, but have your topic creators just use link format and use those defaults that you like. Deleting the parent topic would, of course, delete all the subtopics. And then if you did a read on the, reader or subscribe, observe on the parent topic, you would get all the subtopics also. The other idea that's similar to this is an aggregation topic. And the idea is that if you have a bunch of topics already created, you can create a new topic that sort of works like the parent topic, but it can have any any other topics in it. It's just a collection of topics. So it's sort of more like flat aggregation. And then if you did the read, the CORAL document would contain all of those representations of all of those things that you want to be aggregated in read and in notify. And of course, there's the idea there that with notify, you could get all the data, even the ones that haven't changed, or maybe just the ones that have changed. And there seem to be some use cases for both those behaviors. And we could pick one or make it configurable. Anyway, these last two features are sort of under consideration and being designed. I think that's the last slide. I click, so right, where are we going and what are we doing? So what we want to do is kind of get rough consensus on this protocol now, so we can go ahead and proceed with the detailed design and updating the draft. And we'll expect to have a couple of core interim meetings where we can discuss our revisions to the draft and drive it toward last call, because people want to use this.
Thank you. Everybody is still thinking about this. Where are the blue sheets? Blue sheets, are they circulating?
Maybe it's done.
Hi, Benjamin Dam, ITRON. I'm not sure if the protocol does this or not, but one of the nice things about MQTT is that the topics don't really exist in the server. They're just data structures that get consulted when a message comes in. So you can create billions of topics, of course, because they don't really take up any resources. And it looks like the protocol is moving towards structures where that might be impossible to do. So I was just wondering if you've considered that.
So this, I'm not sure what were you saying at first? How is it that topics don't use any resources?
Well, I don't mean no resources, just that because clients are typically subscribing with wildcards, so the server takes the set of wildcards. It's the set of wildcards that exists as resources, not the topics.
So we're considering some designs that did allow wildcard subscription in the fashion of MQTT, where I can say plus as a path segment. We don't have a design to propose for that, but we'd be happy to collect requirements and kind of like to have a little more discussion about what your use case is and how you think we might do it, maybe.
Yeah, happy to.
Yeah, we definitely want it to be scalable. Okay.
Hey, Dave Robin. You didn't, when you mentioned the two options, the hierarchy or the flat list sort of idea, you didn't touch on the idea of lifecycle management or containment or ownership. You did say that when you delete the parent topic, it deletes the children, but what about the flat list? Is that like a view where deleting the view doesn't delete the members?
Yeah, that would probably.
Otherwise, it's a parent with a single layer of children.
Yes, that would be more like a view where you don't expect to be able to delete everything like you would with the hierarchy.
And you said that the CORAL defines those members, whereas the client doesn't get to define those members.
Well,
these views are not client-driven, where I create a view and I populate it, and then I request that over and over again, and then I delete the view.
It's more like another topic creation. And so you would need to have topic creation rights on the broker, and you would create a topic that then contained links to all of the subtopics that you wanted to aggregate.
It's an endless series of interesting conversations.
So,
how do you do a change of value on that? Do I want only one, or do I want all of them, like you said? You said, oh, we'll make it configurable. All of these things add to the complexity of the server and the program.
And then what you just mentioned about, well, what if the lifetimes are in different places on different ones? What happens with the parent? And
a member of that group go away, and is there a null in its place? And
good point. So that's why these features are in design. And yes.
I think it would be good to point out that many of those things like the flat lists could be extensions to the PubSub broker, and not be a required feature there. So you could have PubSub brokers that supported them and some that don't.
Right. Right. Some of these things that not everything is going to be required. Yeah.
Okay, we are 5 seconds ahead of schedule. We are no longer 5 seconds ahead of schedule.
Peter van der Stok, want to clarify a question, please. How do you see the relation with the work which goes on in ACE for the authorization of the access to the broker?
So,
Do you think the drive to the working group last call means that also that draft has to go to working group last call at the same time?
so what are we creating a dependency on?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
On ACE? Well, we're creating a dependency probably on some of the Coral stuff, but I'm not sure we're creating a dependency on ACE.
So you want to keep that independent?
But the correct solution will probably be ACE for this because they're building the pattern that will do this. So,
But generally, we want to have an answer to the question, how do you secure that in the document? So it certainly would be good if we finish this together with the authorization scheme in ACE. So probably the chairs at some point have to.
As the contents of the draft seem to depend a lot on each other, I would have expected that you want to have to finish at the same time.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Good, let's take note of that. Next, Michael.
Oh, you know what?
Don't go away.
that's right. Okay, this will be shorter. So we're also updating DynLink, and we had some similar issues with DynLink and questions. So we have some similar small-ish redesign that we've done. Pretty much we were looking at the binding table operations and how to do the binding table, and we got a great suggestion from Christian on how to architect this. So this is what we're proposing. There's also some question of how the observe attributes work when you have a use case that requires more data consistency across different endpoints, and we're probably not going to get too much into that discussion right now, but just aware that that's happening, and we'll have that on the list. There's some ongoing discussion about maybe adding new attributes to satisfy those, and there's a proposal in the repo. So basically what we want to do is make the DynLink a resource instead of just a link, and be a resource in a collection. That's the binding table, collection of binding resources. And the binding table has an entry point for creating resources, like the present draft. And again, we're looking at using Coral to be able to do some things that are a little more sophisticated, but link format will still do the job. And creating an entry in the binding table will return a location for the binding you created. The binding resource then basically has a set of links. There's a source link, destination link, and a self link to the binding itself, just as shown here. And then the issue of what's the target attribute now is resolved, because the target attributes in each link only refer to the target of that link. That's how we've got the self link for the binding now, is referring to the binding itself as the target attributes in the link refer to now the binding. So there's no ambiguity about whether the attributes refer to the source or destination or the link. Oh, right. So the binding table, as I said, is a collection of binding resources, has an entry point, returns the location, and that's a little snippet of our API description that says you post to it. In link format with this payload, you get a created response with the location. And that location then allows you to delete. If you have Coral, you can use that location to patch the binding and update it without deleting it and recreating it. Reading the binding table would return a list of links to the current bindings. So in link format, that would basically just be some links. But in Coral, maybe we could do some depth recursion on that and get maybe a way to return more of the information. So you could do one read and inspect all of the bindings on the table, or filter or whatever. But at least we can do this. The conditional observe option is that different clients might have different starting conditions, different settings, and so what you could end up with is a different sequence of notification across the different clients. And sometimes that's okay, maybe sometimes it's not. If I really expect I'm doing machine control or something like that, you may want to have some observe attributes that guarantee or at least do the best under the constraints of CoAP observe to deliver the same set of notifications to all of the observers. So some of the ideas were some absolute based things instead of the relative based things that we specify now. And maybe some behavioral constraints that say when you notify one observer, you have to notify all of them or some set of them that are sharing some notification regime. I see some confused looks, but I try to summarize what the issue is, and it has a few nuances. So our roadmap here is to add the binding table changes if we have consensus. If no one really objects, we'll do those changes. And then we'll need to have some further discussion on this issue with conditional notification attributes and how what we need to do with that, how we need to redesign them, whether we need new attributes, whether we need to remove some of the current attributes if we don't like them. And then maybe reliable notification. Once we get into this machine control or whatever, we might want to look at something like series transfer pattern to do notifications. And what we want to do is roll these in and again, review at the interim meetings and drive toward last call on this. Now, this is currently, I believe, an informational draft. So there was some question also about whether it should be normative. Is that right, Karsten? Is it informational?
Yes.
Yeah. Some people might want it to be, what do you call if it's not informational, normative, or we have a word for it? Sorry?
Standards.
Oh, standards track. Okay, yeah. So we may want to do, since people are using it, those attributes are being used in OMA now, for example.
Yeah, I think it's time for the general discussion about which of these drafts actually are standards track in the traditional sense, or which are essentially just example applications that are available for copying if you're doing something, but are not necessarily the only or even preferred way of doing things, but just something that's there for the taking. So I think we have to define that for this one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
Ivalo.
Okay, hello everyone, my name is Ivan Petrov and I will be presenting the CoreConf. So we'll start with the C draft. It has been really stable now that the minor considerations are good. We have just a few very small changes related to removal of information about deltas that was not used anymore in the draft. And we updated the terminology section of the draft with the latest template. And as it was relying on the C draft because there was something different in the Yank model in the C draft. Now this is no longer the case. We have the type defined inside the C draft itself. So those are all the changes. And for the authors, it should be ready for working group last call. Do the chairs prefer to discuss this now for each?
Let's talk about the cluster at the end.
Okay. Okay.
They're having a bit of a hard time understanding from remote. You could speak like a bit further away from.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So next is the Young draft. And we again have very small changes. They're mostly just improving credibility. Again, we have we are updating the terminology as well in the next version. That's what I started saying. Then about the versions that, the latest version that is published, we have more information how names should be encoded when they are used instead of seats. We have resolved something that was reported on the mailing list in connection to NM values that are inside unions. This could cause some problems if seats are used, and that's why we, in this specific case, we stated that names should be used in order to avoid this ambiguity. And similarly for the unions of bits. And again, we clarified how namespaces should be used inside instance identifiers. Okay, so yeah, here should be fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So then for the tag registry, we have a new tag that defines if someone wants to use seat directly instead of seat delta. This is now possible, and there is a seat tag for this. And also the seat values before were not given. Now we have specific values for each seat tag, for each CBOR tag. And we have received a review from Karsten. Thank you, Karsten. And as I said, we updated the terminology part, and we are clarifying how dates and deltas are used. And we will be making it a little bit less confusing for the examples where sometimes we have plus signs, and this is not exactly clear for some of the readers how they should interpret this, so we're resolving this. And other very small editorial changes. So here we have a small example that seemed to be, the format seemed to be causing some small confusion, whether the interesting part is the one that is in slide green. This is what is being specified in the given place, but in order for it to be properly interpreted, we need to give some context, and this is why we have the rest of the example. So if people find this confusing, please report it on the mailing list. Otherwise, for us, it's well explained, so we will keep it as it is. Okay, at the end we'll ask whether it's okay for working group LASCO. And then for the Young library draft, it was in working group adoption call, but as Karsten said, Andy Bierman had some uncertainty whether it's the best way forward. So if you want, maybe now we can discuss this. So for us, it seems that we will be reducing significantly the size of the discovery for devices, and especially in networks where there will be peer-to-peer communication. This could be rather important. My understanding for the point that Andy is making is that this will happen only once, and normally in the lifetime of a device, and that the size maybe doesn't matter that much. So maybe it's not worth specifying how to use Young library with seats. So this is my understanding of the issue. If anyone has opinion.
Yeah, Carsten, but maybe to give a different spin on the issue, we have spent a lot of time to make the communication about Yang efficient in Yang CBOR. So we can exchange Yang formatted data efficiently. However, occasionally we have to do introspection. So we kind of have a meta use of Yang. And this introspection we haven't optimized. And of course, theoretically, we could change Yang Siba to also have an optimized introspection mechanism. But maybe it's just easier to say, okay, the kind of introspection we're going to do on a constrained sensor is going to be a bit different anyway from what you would do on a large netconf-based router or something like that. So maybe it's okay if we have our own Yang module for introspection. So that's essentially the slight difference we have with Andy here. So fundamentally, there is nothing that is speaking against using the standard Yang introspection library, but we're going to get much larger discovery information from that than from this optimized library. And maybe Andy's view is kind of, we want to use this in the whole spectrum of Yang usage, and so for a tank, it doesn't really make a big difference whether the introspection document is 200 bytes or 2K, but for a temperature sensor, it does make a difference, in particular with respect to fragmentation and all that. So that may be the explanation for the slight difference in view we have here. So having said that, my personal view is that we should go ahead with the working group adoption, and we will be last calling these documents with a special CC to the NetMod and NetConf working groups, and I think we will collect additional input on this from them during the working group last call. So we can still stop this if there are good arguments why this would destroy the Yang universe or anything like that, then of course we shouldn't do this. But for me right now, it seems this is the right way to do this. And we have a remote. Alexander, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Sorry that I cannot be with you physically. I just wanted to reach in, so for the same reasons as previous. But anyway, so I just wanted to be on a plus one on this call. So as Carsten said, it could be, so nothing stops a module, a device to be having, to be implementing the standard IETF Yang introspection module, which could be then fetched from a big server, right, or from a big client, and then tiny implementations to use the core Yang library. So in this way, you know, if you're a big server, and then in any case, you can use the standard library. And if you want a very limited, very optimized version, then you can only go and get the 6. So also from Andy's comment, I think they're not incompatible. So I think it's so my personal opinion is to, of course, copy NetMod and you know, dive a little bit more into this, how the two libraries coexist. But there is no incompatibility between them, and I think that they can coexist in a very nice way.
Thank you. Yep. Let me just point out that nobody sent +1 on the working group adoption call, so maybe you still want to do that.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
Okay. So next slide.
Okay. So then for Komai, again, no big changes. Based on some reviews from the mailing list, we have changed some small things. Well, one of the things is we renamed COMI to CoreConf, as it has been discussed. Then we we used Yang models that are referenced from existing RFCs instead of us redefining them in our appendix, which sounded as a better way of doing it in some examples. And then there is some more information about how to do filtering. The SIT definition of the Yang model was moved as set also for the SIT draft outside of this draft.
You may not have time to actually go through
Okay.
this list because we are 37 seconds over.
Okay, so the important parts are that we have done some clarifications on notifications, on the discovery, and on the SIT deltas, but otherwise some very minor readability improvements, only editorial changes, nothing big has changed.
Okay, so let's talk about the cluster that is ready for Working Class Call right now. So we are still waiting for an update of the Yang Sigurd document.
Yes, I think it will be available by tomorrow. Normally tomorrow it will be ready.
And we need to resubmit the Yang library document to be a working group document, and then we can send the whole stack in the working group last call. Peter doesn't want us to do that.
It's quite the contrary, but maybe Michael wants to make the same remark that I'm going to make. I'm very happy that the documents are far advanced. We are really looking forward to its publications. We want to use it as such. We have still one worry, that's about the process of when the SIT values are changed. It's not quite clear how the communication with Jana is going to happen when you have a file with all the SIT numbers and you use them in all your tests. Then it goes to Jana and it must be an RFC one, so all the numbers change again. It's not quite clear how this process will take place. Am I clear?
For the changes, that's why we said that there could be pre-allocation. So I think that use cases could be handled, but if you want, we can discuss this offline. And
I think 5 phrases which tells explicitly how this is going to be done, so there is no misunderstanding by me asking for the SIT values to be fixed, and Jana would be very welcome indeed.
Okay.
Michael Richardson. I think that the discussion I had with Michelle Cotton yesterday and Benoit on the weekend suggests that all of the Yang modules that we depend upon may need SID values attached to them. So that's something that's going to have to happen. The SID files that we create, we believe that we need to pass them to IANA to manage. We don't know how to do that. We pass Yang files to IANA by putting them in our document, and then we extract them, which is bizarre, but it's what we do. Should we do that with SID files? We don't know.
Okay.
The second point is that there is a worry that Benoit has that when we run Yang minus SID, etc., over the archive of all of the other modules that have already been approved, we may discover issues, conflicts, something else. And that it may be that we need to do that at some point, probably between last working group, last call, and IESG to convince the Yang people that everything is good. So I don't think we have a process for that. And I also know that we don't have our code upstreamed into Yang so that we can trivially do this, and IANA can trivially check it out and run it. So that's a mechanical thing that we need to just be aware of and need to work out. But with the exception, I think we have to have text to explain to IANA in IANA considerations and some agreement about what's going to happen there. That's my working group last call comment. let's put it in working group last call and let's have that happen. But we're going to have a discussion with IANA about this.
Okay, it's noted. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. So we are heavily over time. Thank you, Ivano, and see you on Thursday. Thank you, Ivano.
Hello.
We need to push.